welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my summer reads and going through all of the books that I read this summer. So over the summer I read 6 physical reads and 5 audiobooks for a total of 3,745 pages, which I am super happy about because throughout part of the winter and part of the spring, I was in a major reading slump where I was not reading at all for months. So I definitely came out of that reading slump with a vengeance, and I have been reading a ton. So first of all, we're going to go through the physical reads that I read, which totaled 1,971 pages. And I'm just going to go through from top to bottom what I read, the latest to the most recent. Does that make sense? I don't know what I'm saying. Okay, so the first book that I read was 101 pages, and I don't have it. I have the physical copy, but it's downstairs, and to be honest with you, I'm just too lazy to go get it. So I'll just put a picture of it here. And it is a throwback to my childhood from the Babysitter's Little Sister series, Karen's Ghost. And this was a book that I had read growing up. I absolutely loved this series. I've talked about it so much on my channel. I basically have been trying to collect all of them because I used to read them all the time when I was a kid. I especially read them over the summer holidays. I would always do the library challenges, and I would read so many of these books. So I've been collecting them, so I wanted to start reading them, and I started out with Karen's Ghost because, you know me, I love spooky things, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it was just so nostalgic. I mean, the book obviously isn't amazing. It's a kid's book, but just it was nostalgic for my heart, and it really made me feel happy because of that reason. And basically it follows Karen Tutu, as they call her, because she has 2 sets of families. Her parents are split up, and so she has everything at her mom's house and everything at her dad's house, so they call her Karen Tutu. And in this particular story, it's nearing Halloween, and her teacher says that they're going to be having a Halloween party and that everyone is to come with their scariest, spookiest ghost story. So she ends up hearing this story about her dad's house, that there's a ghost in her attic, and she, along with her older stepsister, goes to find the truth about this ghost and its scariness. And she obviously goes through some scary trying times. But of course, she's Karen Tutu. She comes out victorious, always. The next book that I read is The Dwelling by Susie Maloney. This book was 408 pages, and I gave it 2 stars. I was really quite disappointed with this one. It sounded right up my alley. I was so excited about it. It kind of gave me, from the synopsis, you know, my favorite scary book is Anne Rice's The Witching Hour, and it kind of gave me feeling like that, just from reading the synopsis. I kind of got those feels from the synopsis, so I was really excited and really hopeful for this one because it is about a haunted house, of course. The story is told from 4 different perspectives: the realtor that continues to sell the house, and then the 3 occupants who live in the home in between each time she sells it. So the same realtor ends up selling this house between all the times. And it goes through the stories of each person that lives in the house and their encounter with different entities within the home. So it sounds scary, and obviously this place is turning over really fast because it's a very haunted house. So you really are thinking that you're getting a really good horror novel when you get into it. But unfortunately, it just really fell flat for me. I didn't enjoy it at all. It was almost kind of boring in some parts. And also, it was really hard to connect with the characters because when you're going through so many different perspectives like this, I mean, this book isn't that long, so you don't really get to know each character very well. And as such, you don't really connect with the character enough to care about what happens to them. So you just start caring about the character, you just start getting into it and becoming worried for the character a little bit when pretty much it ends. When their part in the story ends and they end up just you know, leaving the home for whatever reason. And then you have to start again, the next part, with a whole new set of people moving into this house, and you just start again. You know, whenever you first get into a book and it takes you a little while to get to know the characters and to start to really feel for them, imagine having to go through that 4 separate times in one book. It just doesn't work very well. So I think the writing style was lacking. Yeah, I just didn't really enjoy it, and I honestly just found it boring. There are parts of it that were kind of creepy, but it wasn't overly scary. Yeah, I don't really recommend this one. The next book that I read is the start of a new series on my shelf, and if you saw my TBR cart video, I talked about wanting to start some of the series that I have on my shelves because I have so many. So I wanted to start some of them and see if I actually was going to continue on, because this Pendragon is a 10-part series and I have all 10 books, but I haven't read them yet. So I needed to make sure I was going to continue on with them. Otherwise, why am I keeping these 10 books on my shelves for no reason? So I started out with book 1, The Merchant of Death. And this is actually, it almost kind of gives me a little bit of Harry Potter vibes. Like, it kind of maybe wants to be Harry Potter a little bit, but in a different sort of way. So our protagonist is Bobby Pendragon, and he finds out of nowhere that he is what's called a traveler, and he basically travels to different dimensions and saves different universes in different dimensions. So you follow his story as he kind of comes to terms with this. He is really just thrown into a situation where he is kind of forced to change his ways a little bit, because you like him as a character, but you realize that very early on that he's flawed, and he's not really the most heroic person. But throughout the story, that starts to change, and by the end, he kind of like comes into his own and comes into his kind of true calling, so to speak, and the book really sets up for the rest of the series as well. So I really did like this one. I gave it 4 stars, and it was 384 pages. The next book that I read is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, and this was one that my best friend Lane purchased for me in our video, Bessie Buys My Books, where we went thrift shopping and I bought some clothes for her over on her channel, and she bought some books for me for my channel. And she has been after me to read this one. It's one of her favorite books. She kept talking to me about it and saying that I was going to love it. And I was a little bit unsure at first, you guys. Like, she had taken a trip to Lebanon, and she was in Lebanon at the time that I was reading this, and I'm Snapchatting her, and I'm like, look what I'm starting. At first, you know, I'm all excited about it, and then I'm getting about a quarter of the way into it, and it's very slow going to start. First of all, like the first couple of chapters, I really was excited about it because the writing style is absolutely beautiful. Like, there's just certain prose that she kind of puts in her chapters that are just like, it's beautiful writing. And so I kind of started getting a little bit of Mitch Albom vibes a little bit, because Mitch Albom is really like that. He just has very, very beautiful and almost lyrical writing style. And this kind of started off that way. So I was a little bit excited about it at first, but then it kind of started getting boring a little bit. So basically our protagonist is Margaret, and she owns a bookstore. She and her family own a bookstore, and she's just kind of like doing her thing. She's reading her books, and all of a sudden she gets a letter from the famous writer Vida Winter, who wants her, of all people, out of nowhere, to write her autobiography. And this comes as a surprise to Margaret, because Vida Winter has been notoriously private about her entire life. Any interviews that she's ever given regarding her private life, she's made up complete lies about it. So she is extremely private, and nobody knows her real story. Nobody knows where she came from, like what her real name is, or anything like that. So when she gets invited to go and stay with this recluse, she goes and she starts to uncover the real story about Vida Winter's life. And there's a kind of a murder mystery in there. There's hints of some paranormal things going on in there. But at the end, there's a huge twist that I did not see coming. There's a couple of twists. There's one twist that I saw coming, and then there's another twist that I didn't really see coming. So that kind of changed it around for me, and it brought up my rating to a 4, because at first I was thinking it was probably going to be about a 2, and then once I got about 3/4 of the way through, it brought it up to about a 4. And I actually almost DNF'd this one. The only reason that I didn't is because it came so highly recommended from Lane. And now Lane and I don't really typically read a lot of the same books anyways. So, I mean, it's not that her recommendation, speaks volumes, because we don't typically read the same books. But just because she was so adamant about this one in particular, I just thought I'm going to see it through. And I am glad that I did, because I did end up liking it a lot. Like I said, it was a little bit slow going, but it does have a good story. There's a good twist to it, and I definitely still would recommend reading it. The next to last physical read that I read is Fiend, Harold Shooter, and this is the shocking true story of America's first serial killer. So this actually dates back into the 1800s, and this was about a boy named Jesse Pomeroy who committed absolutely atrocious acts against children. He was 14 at the time when he committed these acts, and they're absolutely barbaric, and it was really, really difficult for me to read at first. I will say the first probably quarter of the book, or maybe third of the book, was very riveting. It was just like fast paced. It was a page turner. It was terrible in the best way, if that makes sense. I mean, it's a true crime novel. Like, this is true crime. This is a story that really happened. So I mean, of course, you just have such mixed feelings when you're reading something like this, because it's disgusting what he did to these children. And as a mother myself, it was very hard to read about, because obviously, like, you just imagine your own child going through something like that, and it breaks your heart for these poor children. But it was very, like, it was definitely a page turner. I'll just say that. Like I said, for about the first third of the book. But then after that, it actually got almost boring in a way. It talked a lot about the trial, and a lot of the book is comprised of like newspaper articles from the times. So basically, he would just talk about kind of the difference that people felt, because Jesse was on trial for murder, obviously. He was a serial killer. And they were trying to decide whether or not to impose the death penalty on him at such a young age. And so, of course, the community was completely divided on this. Some people thought, you know, he's only 14 years old, you can't sentence him to death. And then other people thought, well, you know, if he was able to commit these crimes at only 14 years old, you know, you're probably best likely to just put this man to death already, or this boy to death. So a lot of the book was kind of showcasing those contradicting opinions. And a lot of it was letters. I guess people used to always write in letters into the newspaper, just in regards to their opinions on things like this. And so a lot of this book was that, and it just kind of was like, I don't really care what random people in the community thought of this at the time, or if you're going to put that in the book, don't make it be like almost 3/4 of the book, if that makes sense. So I actually gave this book a 2-star rating. It was 320 pages long, and like I said, the first like third of it was pretty good. If you read probably the first third of it and then like the last couple of chapters to find out what actually happened to him, you'd probably be okay, and you'd find out about the story and kind of skip all the boring parts in between. So the last physical read that I read was another asylum novel. This was the third in the series. This one was called Catacombs. So I have read the first 2 novels in this series. The first one was called Asylum. The second one, what was the second one called? I don't know if it says in here. Now I need to know. It doesn't say. I can't remember what the second one was called. But the first 2 books, I really, like, I probably gave them both a 2. I really, really want to like them just because they look so creepy. And I love books that have different kind of mediums in it. Like, and this one is kind of like the Ransom Riggs novels, The Peculiar Children, where it has pictures. So, and there's like a ton of different pictures in the book. I'm going to try to, I don't know why I do this stuff, because you can never see what I'm talking about, but I still do it anyway. I don't know. Anyway, so there's tons of pictures in here. I really, really wanted to like them. And I think there's 6 of them in the series, 6 books in the series. So after the first 2, I decided I was going to give the third one a chance. And if I wasn't liking it by like 100 pages in, I was just going to DNF the rest of the series. But I'm happy to say that the third one actually was quite a bit better than the last 2. The issue that I have mostly with these books is the writing style. It's very juvenile, and I understand, like, it's probably younger than YA. So what is that? I can't remember what that genre is. It's like, but it's about 17-year-old kids, 18-year-old kids, like they're just graduating high school. But they interact with each other almost like middle schoolers would. And it just is kind of awkward. Like it's awkward exchanges. It's kind of cheesy. Like their dialogue is kind of cheesy, and it doesn't seem believable. The characters don't seem believable. And that still is true in this book, but it is getting better. So I'm hoping that her writing style is just improving, and that maybe with practice, she's just getting to be a better writer. So I am looking forward to the next book just to see if that continues. because the first two books were pretty bad with it, and this one still had it as well, but it wasn't quite as bad. But and also, like, in the last two books too, the characters fall really flat, and so you don't really care that much or know that much about them. You don't really feel invested in them, and that is still true in this book, which is really, really odd when you think about it, to be on the third book of a series and not really to feel like you know the characters very well. So like I said, I think it's just more of a writing style thing, not necessarily a plot thing. And basically, look, I've talked so much about these books and I haven't even told you what this one is about. But it's these three friends, Dan, Abigail, and what the heck is his name? His other friend. You see, I should know the three people's names. Like, this is the third book in the series. I should know. Jordan. Dan, Abby, and Jordan. Dan is the main character, and we follow the book through his eyes, and his friends, Abby and Jordan, kind of help him on these supernatural adventures. And basically, they met in the first book at a kind of a college recruitment sort of thing, I guess you would say. And they just end up falling into these paranormal experiences, and these things just keep on happening to them, and they have to get themselves out of these insane, crazy situations that are mostly paranormal. Kind of paranormal? Yeah, paranormal, I would say. And yeah, and it's no different in this book. They are on a road trip together and they end up being followed, and things just start to happen. So I definitely, like I said, so far this is my favorite book of the series, and I am going to give the fourth book a try. And this one was 352 pages, and I ended up actually giving it a 4-star rating. So now we're going to move into the audiobooks, and the first audiobook that I listened to this summer was Like Never and Always by Anne Aguirre, which was 336 pages, and I gave a 5-star rating. So this book is actually a really cool premise. It's definitely a different type of idea that I've never really heard of for a book. So it is about two best friends, Morgan and Olivia, and they are dating brothers. So the first brother is kind of like straight-laced and got his stuff together. And the second brother, the older brother, is more of like the bad boy. He's not really respected that much in the town that they live in. But one night, the four of them are out, they're drinking at a party, and they end up driving home, and they get into a really, really bad car accident, which leaves Morgan killed. See, it's kind of, you're going to understand in a minute why I'm like, So it leaves Olivia killed. Yes. And the rest of them alive. However, Olivia's spirit is still alive and it transfers into Morgan's body. So Morgan wakes up, but she's Olivia. So it's Olivia's cognitive, and she's waking up in Morgan's body, and she gets told that Olivia died. So Morgan's spirit is gone and Olivia's body is gone. Does this make sense? I should have probably just read the synopsis, because you guys are probably like, what are you talking about? But I think it made sense. So basically, obviously, this is like insanity to her. And so she wakes up and her boyfriend Nathan is there, and Nathan is the older bad boy, and she... And so there's supernatural element to this in the fact that a person is waking up in another person's body, but it's also a love story as well, because she feels like she can't tell anybody what's going on. She thinks that people are just going to think that she's crazy, and so she's trying to figure out what's going on her own. And in the meantime, her actual boyfriend that she is in love with is heartbroken because his girlfriend is dead, and she can't comfort him. Meanwhile, she's supposed to be dating his brother, and so she has to continue kind of acting like normal for this guy as well. So there's a romantic element, a love story element to it, and also kind of a supernatural element to it. And there's also a little bit of a thriller element to it as well, because there's kind of, basically, once she starts living Morgan's life, she starts realizing that Morgan was into some things that she did not know about, and that her life was actually quite dangerous. And there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that she had no clue about. So I really, really enjoyed this one, you guys. I definitely recommend you pick this one up. It's really great for the Halloween season as well, like kind of spooky vibes. So I definitely recommend this one for a read. The next book that I read was The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. This one was 304 pages, and I also gave it a 5-star rating. So I was a little bit unsure about this one because I read The Real Frankenstein last year for the first time around the Halloween season, and I didn't really care for it too much, which I was really surprised about. And I had also heard kind of some negative things about this story. This book has been getting quite a bit of talk about on BookTube. I've heard a lot of BookTubers talk about it, and it's been getting some mixed reviews, so I wasn't 100% sure. I think Haley in Bookland was one that didn't really care for it too much, but also, you know, Haley is my favorite BookTuber, and I'm not sure why. I think it's just her personality because I love her so much. But she and I don't read any of the same books at all. So the fact that she doesn't like a book, it probably means I will like it, is what I'm starting to come to realize. But I still just watch her anyways. I just love her so much. But yeah, it's been getting some mixed reviews, so I wasn't sure about it, but I actually really enjoyed it. It gave a different perspective on the classic tale of Frankenstein, and it kind of lets you see the story through somebody else's eyes. And Elizabeth is just such a strong character. I really identified with her, and I really enjoyed her character. She is the type of person that just does whatever she needs to do to survive, and she is a survivor, and you are just rooting for her throughout this whole book. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is going to be kind of surprising, I think, to anybody who actually knows my channel and knows me, but I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and you guys, I loved it! I am like so surprised that I love this because this is not the type of book I would typically read at all. The only reason that I even picked it up was because it was on my audiobook library. Like, I just get my audiobooks usually from the library, and it was on there. And I had heard so much buzz about it. It's been everywhere, obviously. And so I was like, well, I mean, it's free. I might as well give it a shot. You guys, I loved it. I loved the format. It was so different. Having a book being completely told in like interview perspective was so different to me, and at first it was like a little bit difficult to get used to. I kind of had a hard time like putting like the separate people in separate, you know, remembering who was who. But at the end of the day, I think that the audiobook is the way to go to read this because it was almost more like a production, right? Because they had different people voicing the different characters. So it was just, it was really cool. I really enjoyed it, and it really, like, the writing style and everything, I really felt like I was there. I felt like I was actually a part of Daisy Jones and the Six. I felt like I was like in the band, and I don't know, I really liked it a lot, you guys. This one was 368 pages, and I gave it a 4-star rating. The next to last book that I read was The Wrong Girl by C.J. Archer. This book was 218 pages, and I gave it a 3-star rating. To be completely honest with you guys, I don't even really remember a whole lot about this book, and I didn't really read it that long ago, so I'm sure that says a lot. But basically our main character, whose name I cannot remember, she basically has been locked up in an ivory tower pretty much her entire life. She's been locked up in the attic. She was an orphan, and a rich man, I don't know if he was an earl or what he was, but a rich man, I guess, adopted her to kind of be his daughter's companion. So what you are told is that she suffers from narcolepsy, and the daughter that she is supposed to be the companion to is able to start fires with her mind. So this is kind of a magical realism sort of situation where, you know, it's set in, I think it's like the way that they talk, I would assume that it's set maybe in 1800s, early 1900s maybe. But this girl is able to start fires with her mind, and she ends up getting kidnapped. However, they kidnap the wrong girl. So they mean to kidnap the daughter of the earl, but they accidentally kidnap the companion who suffers from narcolepsy. And they are intending to kidnap the girl that can start fires because they think that they can help her. So they bring her to this place, to this home, and there's a man there that can do the same thing, can start fires, and he's like trying to teach her to control her ability and that sort of thing. Only they don't realize that they've got the wrong girl. But like I said, I did like it. I don't really remember a whole lot about it. Like, it's just weird. I didn't read it that long ago, and I kind of glossed over it. So it's not very memorable, I will say that. It was a pretty good read. I rated it a 3, so it wasn't bad, but it just wasn't very memorable, obviously, or I would remember more about it. And the last book that I listened to was The Stranger Beside Me, The Story of Ted Bundy by Anne Rule. And Goodreads says this book is 548 pages, but I think that that has to be wrong because it was only like 2-hour-long audiobook. So I'm pretty sure that's got to be wrong, unless there was a bunch of pictures maybe in the physical copy. I'm not sure. But I gave this one a 4 stars. It's just what it says. It's the story of Ted Bundy. I love true crime, so I obviously know quite a bit about Ted Bundy to begin with. But this was really interesting in the fact that it was written by somebody who actually knew him. So it was somebody that went to college with him and kind of knew him even after he was convicted of these crimes. Like, she kept in touch with him. So that's why it's called The Stranger Beside Me, because she knew him pretty well. So it was really good. It was informative. It was interesting. Didn't have any boring parts. So I actually really enjoyed it, as much as you can enjoy a true crime book about murder. Anyways, you guys, those are the books that I ended up reading this summer. Let me know in the comments down below if you read any of the same ones that I did. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of them if you did. And thanks for hanging out with me. I will see you guys in my next video.